Patty Murray didn't just question Pete Hegseth. She dismantled him, piece by piece, live in Congress, exposing what many have quietly feared about his leadership of the Department of Defense. It wasn't a soft jab or polite disagreement. It was a full-scale confrontation, the kind that makes viewers stop, rewind, and wonder how someone in such a powerful position could be allowed to operate unchecked for so long. Murray cut straight through the polished talking points and laid bare what she described as reckless decisions, shadowy maneuvers, and a dangerous misuse of military power. From the moment she began, Murray made it clear this wasn't about politics or sound bites. It was about competence, about the survival of an institution that cannot afford to be weakened.
Mr. Secretary, you talk about returning the department to its mission of warfighting, but I am repeatedly hearing that your policy and personnel changes at the Pentagon are only undermining, not strengthening our military's preparedness to protect our country. You are deploying the American military to police the American people. You're sending the National Guard into California without the governor's request. Sending the Marines not after foreign threats, but after American protesters. And now President Trump is promising heavy force against peaceful protesters at his D.C. military parade. Those sorts of actions and that sort of rhetoric from a president of the United States should stop every one of us cold. Threatening to use our own troops on our own citizens at such scale is unprecedented, it is unconstitutional, and it is downright un-American. We should all be speaking out against this and demanding accountability. Now, Mr. Secretary, I have to say, for people who tout their commitment to transparency and efficiency, I've never seen an administration more bent on hiding basic facts from American people. Your department has been unresponsive to congressional inquiries and oversight requests, all the while you are working to muzzle the free press, denying journalists access to the Pentagon press corps. Now, before I turn to my questions, let me just note, it is now mid-June, and we only, just a few days ago, received some, but not all, important portions of your budget request. It should not have taken this long to get this request, and we do still need to see the justifications in order for this committee to do its work. We're missing those. Not having a full budget at this juncture is really unacceptable. So I am deeply concerned. So let me turn to my questions, and this is important. This administration has put the civilian workforce under attack from day one, encouraging resignations, firing probationary employees, instituting hiring freeze, requiring OPM to approve any new hire one by one, and now, new last week, requiring prospective employees to explain how they would, quote, help support the President's executive orders and policy priorities. We have spoken with military installations across our country. Almost all of them have been forced to fire skilled civilian employees who are badly needed, and all of them also have hundreds, and in some cases thousands, of new hires ready to bring on board, but now have to individually be reviewed by OPM, apparently to ensure that they support the President's priorities. Secretary Hegseth, I want to know, and keep your answers short, I have limited time, will you be firing more shipbuilders, yes or no?
Senator, we haven't fired shipbuilders. We've offered through a right-sizing of our civilian positions, which everyone in this committee would acknowledge that the Defense Department has had a bloated bureaucracy for a long time, have given a voluntary process by which some people can choose to take a DRP.
I'm just asking you
so it's
a question.
not a firing of shipbuilders. That's a totally disingenuous characterization of what our department is doing. We are focusing on shipbuilding.
Mr. Secretary, do we need more or fewer shipbuilders?
We are investing historically in our shipbuilding defense industrial base and workforce and ships in this budget, more than anything the previous administration ever did.
So, well, you managed to fire highly skilled workers, including my home state of Washington, for no reason. So let me just say, the Navy needs welders, not people who can recite a president's executive orders. If the Navy wants...
She pointed to the chaos inside the Pentagon. Top aides abandoning their posts, respected military officials fired, positions left vacant, and instead of seasoned professionals being brought in to steady the ship, a wave of political loyalists filling the ranks. On paper, These replacements looked obedient. In reality, they were inexperienced, untested, and far from capable of steering the Department of Defense through the crises America faces. Murray's message was simple. This isn't strength, it's sabotage, but what made jaws drop wasn't just the firings. It was what those firings symbolized: a pattern of purges, a culture of fear, and an organization more focused on pleasing political masters than protecting the nation. For Murray, this wasn't abstract theory. In her own state of Washington, thousands of skilled civilian employees had been pushed out. These weren't paper pushers or redundant roles. These were engineers, shipbuilders, and military support staff who kept America's defenses sharp. Losing them didn't just leave gaps in the workforce, it left holes in national security. And that was just the beginning. Because while these professionals were being sidelined, Hegseth was busy using the military in ways the Constitution never intended. Murray called him out directly for deploying troops, not to confront foreign threats, but to intimidate Americans in their own streets. Peaceful protesters found themselves facing down the National Guard. Marines, who should have been preparing for external conflicts, were instead turned against citizens exercising their rights. And it wasn't a one-off. It was becoming a pattern, amplified by rhetoric that promised heavy force at parades and demonstrations. Murray's voice cut through the hearing room. Using the military as a political weapon against Americans wasn't just unprecedented. It was unconstitutional. And it was downright un-American. That moment shifted the entire tone. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about budget lines or bureaucratic adjustments. It was about the heart of democracy. Because if the Department of Defense becomes a tool to silence dissent rather than defend freedom, then the very idea of America is under attack, not from abroad, but from within. Murray reminded everyone listening, the military is supposed to protect citizens, not control them. And the more Hegseth leaned into intimidation, the more fragile the nation's freedoms became. But Murray wasn't finished. She pivoted sharply to another issue that had been simmering in the background: secrecy. For an administration that loved to boast about transparency, Murray laid out a record that looked more like deliberate obstruction. Budget requests delayed for months, critical documents withheld from Congress, oversight treated like an inconvenience rather than a constitutional duty. Journalists were being blocked from the Pentagon press corps, questions went unanswered, and even basic numbers about where taxpayer dollars were flowing had to be dragged out into the open. Murray made the stakes crystal clear. If Congress can't do its job, if journalists can't access information, then accountability disappears. And without accountability, corruption thrives. It was a stunning moment of clarity. Because the question wasn't just what decisions were being made, it was what decisions were being hidden. And Murray wasn't about to let that slide. She accused Hegseth and his allies of funneling resources into domestic crackdowns while foreign threats multiplied. Instead of defending against adversaries abroad, taxpayer money was being used to militarize American streets. Instead of hiring shipbuilders, welders, and defense engineers, loyalty tests were being imposed on prospective employees. The administration was demanding not just competence, but political obedience. And Murray's response was blunt. If you can weld, you can work. That one line landed like a hammer. In a single sentence, she tore apart the entire facade of efficiency and reform that Hegseth had been trying to sell. Because what good is efficiency if it guts the very workforce that builds the ships, maintains the bases, and keeps America's military ready? What good are flashy budget numbers if the people who actually do the work are being pushed out in favor of those willing to parrot political slogans? Murray described bases across the country bleeding talent. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of skilled workers sidelined because of hiring freezes, forced resignations, and ideological filters. Meanwhile, positions sat empty, projects stalled, and morale collapsed. And as she pointed out, that isn't just bad policy. It's a direct threat to national security. Murray painted a picture that wasn't just about leadership gone wrong, but about the cascading effect of instability inside the Department of Defense. When trusted aides walk away in frustration, when seasoned generals are dismissed for refusing to toe a political line, the ripple effect reaches far beyond the walls of Washington. It spreads uncertainty through command structures. It slows decision-making in moments where seconds matter, and it tells career professionals that loyalty to individuals matters more than loyalty to the Constitution. That's not stability. That's institutional sabotage dressed up as reform. She also expanded on the dangers of misusing the military domestically. She reminded everyone that history offers grim warnings when armed forces are turned inward against the very citizens they swore to protect. Communities already strained by protests now face armored vehicles rolling down their streets, parents keeping children inside for fear of escalating clashes, and the chilling image of neighbors treated as enemies. It is a dangerous precedent, one that erodes trust between citizens and government and leaves scars that last long after the troops are gone. Murray's warning was simple. Once the line is crossed, once people see soldiers as enforcers rather than protectors, rebuilding that trust could take generations. When she described the civilian workforce being gutted, Murray went beyond numbers. She talked about families forced to relocate after losing stable employment, about highly trained specialists with decades of experience suddenly sidelined, about projects delayed because the right people were no longer in the room. Shipyards that should be buzzing with activity now operate with skeleton crews. Bases that once relied on experienced administrators are left scrambling to train replacements who may not stay. The human toll, Murray said, isn't just about paychecks. It's about entire communities hollowed out by policies that value politics over professionalism. At this point, it was clear Murray wasn't letting Hegseth hide behind jargon. When he tried to claim that shipbuilders hadn't been fired but had voluntarily departed as part of a right-sizing process, she cut him off. The reality, she said, was simple. You can't claim to be investing in shipbuilding while simultaneously gutting the shipyards of their workers. A shipyard without skilled welders and engineers isn't a shipyard, it's a shell. And no amount of spin about historic investments can cover the fact that the very people capable of turning those investments into real ships were being shown the door. Her persistence forced the uncomfortable truth into the open. This wasn't about efficiency. It wasn't about accountability. It was about power, about reshaping the Department of Defense into a political weapon, stripping it of independence, and making it loyal not to the Constitution, but to individuals. And if that meant gutting civilian staff, silencing oversight, and using the military against citizens, then so be it. But Murray's message to the American people was clear. If we let this become the new normal, then democracy itself is at risk. By the time her questioning ended, there was no mistaking the impact. Hegseth had offered rehearsed lines and bureaucratic spin. Murray had offered facts, examples, and a vision of what accountability should look like. She didn't let him wriggle away with half-answers. She didn't let him paint over the damage with buzzwords about efficiency. She cut straight through the noise to the heart of the issue. Leadership that weakens America isn't leadership at all, and the cost of letting it continue would be measured not just in dollars, but in the safety and freedom of the nation. And in her closing, Murray reminded Americans that democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires vigilance, it requires accountability, and it requires voices willing to speak uncomfortable truths when silence would be easier. She warned that if efficiency is used as a shield to justify secrecy, if loyalty tests replace professional merit, then the cost won't just be measured in delayed ships or missed deadlines. The cost will be measured in diminished safety, weakened institutions, and a legacy of mistrust that will take years to repair. That's why this moment matters. Because it wasn't just Patty Murray versus Pete Hegseth. It was democracy versus secrecy, competence versus blind loyalty, national security versus political theater. And Murray made it clear which side she stood on. The only question left is whether America will listen. So what do you think? Was Patty Murray right to call out what she described as reckless abuses at the Department of Defense? Or do you think Hegseth's spin about efficiency holds any water? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe, because the next story we're covering is even more explosive than this one.